Hey everybody, this is Bevan. Welcome to Bevan, a femme over 40 and her friends podcast. I'm your host, Bevan. I've said my name 3 times. It's time to start the show. And I'm also joined by my co-host, Biscuit Reynolds, who, if you don't know, my podcast is my Persian cat, who has already gone to be with the goddess, but I believe he is here in our hearts and being a feline overlord all the time. I keep hearing him snuffling here and there. Every now and again, I'll find a pellet of his cat litter somewhere, just little signs, and I appreciate him continuing to show up. And I just want to acknowledge like the process of grieving an animal companion gets to be as complex and ongoing as the process of grieving a human loved one. And I just had a good cry about it 2 days ago. So, you know what I mean? Like, we're here to destigmatize grieving because quality of grief is quality of life. And that's part of living. And something I grieve a lot is the idea of the government being here to help us or save us, the idea of choice in democracy. And I think the political theater that's been playing out recently is really showing us the emperor has no clothes and that, truly it's up to us. And I wanted to bring my friend Sonya on the podcast again. She was here a couple years ago, and I'll link to that episode in the show notes. She was here a couple years ago talking about police and policing and prisons, and she does such a good job explaining things. And the thing I want to say to empower you is that you are the most radical person that many people in your life know, and that is something that keeps me going to keep amplifying things because I'm certainly not the most radical person in my life. Like I think we tend to be in the middle of who we surround ourselves by, right? So just remember like how important your voice is in the lives of the people around you. We have such a greater influence than we're even aware of. And I'll say that as a person who's very intentionally a good influence on the world around me. And I use air quotes for that because who knows what I'm doing, but like I'm intentionally out here influencing, right? But like even if you're not intending to do it, you're doing it. And so Sonya certainly for me is an example of living out the values of a new world and visioning for a new world that is possible. And she has more than 2 decades of experience doing organizing and activism around bringing justice for all in the world and freedom for everybody. And all of our liberation is bound up in one another. This conversation is both deep and shallow, right? Like we talk about some pretty heavy stuff that we could talk about for 6 hours, but I tried to make it an hour-ish long so that folks would actually listen to it. We're not trying to do a master class. We're just trying to get some information out there that I think is really helpful and just like helping us feel more confident speaking up and connecting to people in our lives. And that's some of the greatest work we'll do is with connection. And before we get started with our show, I just want to remind you the very best way to support this podcast is through my Patreon page, Patreon, Patreon.com. It's a membership support site that allows folks like you to support creators like me that make work that you value. I think in these times, Patreon is such an extraordinary tool that enables me to have some of my material needs met so that I can focus some of my time on my art and activism, which means so much to me. And I'm so grateful for everyone, past, present, and future, who supports my Patreon page. My page is patreon.com/FKDP, which stands for Fat Kid Dance Party, which is my aerobics class for anyone who feels left behind by mainstream fitness. If you've ever been called too much, too fat, or felt too awkward to dance, mine is the supportive class for you. I have tiers that get you access to all of my Zoom aerobics classes. And I also have an on-demand membership, which is a very sustaining membership for me it's $25 a month, which is less than the cost of one Soul Cycle class, less than the cost of most gym memberships, although some of them are a lot cheaper, but they're cheap because they bank on people not going, right? I really want you to come. I really want you to show up for class. I really want to help you change your life because you learn much faster through play than you do through repetition. Anyway, so it's a very amazing aerobics class. I'm so grateful that I get to create it and bring it to the world. And it's a lot of fun. And anyway, so I've been teaching that for about a little more than 7 years, which is kind of wild to think about it. At least once a week, I've taught a class, usually more than that. And So that's available for you. I also teach spiritual self-care lessons. Spirituality is something that I got tuned into about 15, 14 years ago, after not really believing in God. It just like I needed I needed help. I was kind of in a rock bottom place emotionally, and I needed to understand that there was a power greater than me. And my spirituality is such a huge part of my life, and I've been really called to be teaching on it. So I have 18 lessons on there about like spiritual self-care and my practices, so that it can help you build your practice. And there's so much more to come. I have a lot that is brewing in me that really feels like this is the time. Like this is the time where we need to be leaning on things greater than ourselves, because the material world around us, all the things we were leaning on before, we can't lean on anymore because they were not built on solid foundations. We talk about this in this episode, but like, you know, America was built on a legacy of genocide and chattel slavery. And we're seeing the ways in which those foundations cannot hold, and that a reckoning is happening and needs to happen. So I'm so curious how this is all going to turn out. That's kind of like my favorite thing to say right now when my friends are dealing with like hard circumstances, and when I'm dealing with hard circumstances, is I'm just so curious how this is all going to work out, because I trust it's going to work out. I just don't know how yet. And that's the point of faith, is belief in things unseen. So I have faith that we're going to get through this. And I do know that we're going to get through this together. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time and your attention. And remember, the three most precious resources you have are your time, treasure, and talent. And I hope you shepherd them well. Sonya, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going,
It's going great, since I get to hang out with you and talk about how we can actually make America better.
Make America great again, which means maybe, you know, it not existing anymore. That's my wish for America this year.
I mean, all borders are illegitimate and made up. And once I realized that, I just blew my mind. I was like, wait, I was brainwashed to believe we needed these borders to stay safe. But actually, the call is coming from inside the house.
All truth is coming from inside the house.
In my red, because I live in a very purple area, strong blue parts and strong red parts. And so even though binaries, again, are also all illegitimate and do not reflect actual human diversity, the signs for Trump are saying, take America back, which is so gross and aggressive.
Yeah. But at the same time, those people don't play around.
No, they really don't, and they're more organized than the left or liberals. And I would say liberals are like more of the what Martin Luther King Jr. described as like the white moderate, you know, like the I'm gonna say it. It's
right. The people who are comfortable, live really comfortable lives, or are really bought into the system to the point of think that we can make change inside of it, which, you know, sometimes we have to make change inside of it in order to materially better people's lives in the now, because there are so many people suffering. But we always have to remember, as Audre Lorde told us, that the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. So we have to be innovative and be in community with each other, and understand that safety is through solidarity and not participating in the violence of the Western state system. Or trying not to participate in it, even though we all participate all the time.
doing your best, because here's the thing, like perfectionism is also a trap, and it keeps you paralyzed, or at least for me, like when I can't be perfect frequently, I've had an intense freeze response. And so I just want to take the same values I apply everywhere in life, including aerobics, which is like you can't get it wrong, right? Like just try. And like if you get it wrong, you learn a new way to not do it, right? Like Thomas Edison invented 999 ways to not make a light bulb until he finally invented it. And probably he stole it from a personal color. But here's what I want to talk about: Christian nationalism and Palestine with you, because I feel like you're like my local expert. And I've learned so much from you over the years, just from your activism and how you explain things. I think you have such a good way of making things very accessible. And you did a Christian nationalism training on Instagram Live on Christmas Day. What a day. What a day.
Actually, we didn't directly talk about, I did talk about Christian nationalism, but I talked about Christian Zionism
Oh,
because
Christian Zionism, that's right. There's two different things, but let's
yes,
define these things. And first I want to define solidarity, because I think when I feel solidarity from someone, it's far better than allyship. You know what I mean? Solidarity is like an intensity of a connection. Will you define solidarity?
yeah, I would say that solidarity, and obviously there's a million ways to define it, and I'm not, a radical leftist author. I'm just like a leftist who's been doing it for a long time. I would say that my personal definition of solidarity is understanding that your safety, that your own personal safety, your physical safety, your mental safety is not only tied up in your own ego, but is, your own personal safety is tied up in the safety of all other human beings and other all life forms on this planet. And we need to I think solidarity is about trying to figure out how to live with each other in better ways, in more innovative ways, in ways that where we don't harm each other. And if we do harm each other, we figure out a way to repair it without further doing harm. And yeah, we don't live in a world like that right now.
We do well, we don't live in an overculture like that, but I think in our subcultures, solidarity is like one of the most essential things we can offer, because I think as we see, we can't really rely on the government. And I think that was always an illusion. Just I remember when the illusion was shattered for me that the police kept us safe, and I was like, oh wait, no, the police exist to protect capital. And
Yes.
my favorite example is like, think about if your boss shorted you $100 in your paycheck, whether you could call the cops, and if you're running a cash register and you were $100 short, whether the boss could call the cops on you, right? Like, and what that looks like.
Which it's hilarious because this has come up for some reason. This has come up multiple times in the past week, but my first retail job was a job at being a cashier at Urban Outfitters my freshman year of college, and I almost got fired for stealing from the till. Turns out that the manager was stealing from a bunch of tills. I was, as I'm sure you know, because we've connected on this, I was one of those good kids. I never did anything bad my entire life. I didn't fucking smoke a drug or do an alcohol when I was in high school, excuse me, because I was too freaked out. I lived in a very sober household. Like, so stealing, I just never did that. Although I did know, we grew up in the era of kids who shoplifted at the mall. So I definitely knew some of those people, but I was a people pleaser. Like, I never wanted to do anything bad. And yeah, I got accused of stealing from my register, because every single day after you finish a shift at Urban Outfitters, and I'm sure at other like clothing retail places, the computer counts your register down. And if it's not even, if it's like over or under, you get written up. Me, the lowliest, the lowliest of all Urban Outfitters workers. Yeah, and I got accused of stealing. Turns out the manager was stealing from multiple cash registers, our manager, and yeah, it was bad. Anyway, not to derail, but it's funny how you learn those lessons in real life, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
no one's gonna help me.
No, and you can't protect yourself by being perfect. And I think that's where the people pleasing and perfection comes through, is like, oh, I think it'll keep me safe. But it turns out it's not. And I also want to say, before we like go hard on Christianity, like the thing I critique is Christian hegemony. I myself love Jesus and use Jesus as an example and a teacher of what's possible for a human being. I'm like big into the toppling the tax collectors table Jesus, you know, the revolutionary, not the like, oh, we're just using this to make you believe like in the structure of power so that you'll conform. Because it's really like, religion exists to exert power and control, you know, like faith and spirituality are entirely different from religion. And like, and there's also just a fallacy that we're raised to believe in the US about freedom of religion and that we're supposed to be free. Like, it's like this whole founding fathers thing, when really it was just property.
You cannot be free from, it doesn't matter what religion you are in the US, you cannot be free from Christianity. And from the world, from most of the world for that matter, because the very time, the calendar that we keep is a Christian-based calendar. And that's capitalism, that's organized religion, that's Christian hegemony, that's, you know, all of these things that we, in the ocean of like what we swim in, that it doesn't really matter how much, you know, I'm Jewish and like Jewish time is such a huge deal. But it's like, I couldn't ever just keep a Jewish time calendar, you know, like then I would be just, my life would be so much more difficult. Like that's the world that you live in, you know, and it's hard to envision something better and cooler and more awesome when you have never lived outside of that.
Yeah. And we're not taught how to be risk takers and how to perceive things from a visionary perspective. We're taught how to conform because our belonging, a human need, is held hostage to our conformity to the overculture. And I think hopefully for some of us, like time shows, that actually doesn't work. But I'm seeing a lot of people spinning out right now because we're in an era of the emperor has no clothes. Like someone, goddess bless them, on Instagram.com did the math of how much our tax dollars are going to like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and like bombs that are killing babies. Like, and we're watching the babies being killed in real time on the internet in a way that like we just haven't before, you know, and like the political pageantry. Not even.
According to the WHO, one child dies every 10 minutes in Gaza. One child. I'm sorry. I have to say that. I try to say it like to myself every day, you know, at least once. Because as a Jewish person, I feel so responsible, you know, I feel so responsible. A child every 10 minutes.
Is that based on the statistics? Because I read a thing where like, in order to have the body count, they have to identify parts of the bodies and they can't even actually do that.
I think these are just the children they know of, you know, these are just the people that they know of.
Yeah. And I want to make the distinction for anyone out there who thinks it's a war and not a genocide, that like a war is fought by two parties that have armies, you know, like actual militia. And there's no one fighting back from Gaza. Like this is literally just the death of the people.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas is trying to protect the hostages, but Hamas is a political party. They're not an army. I mean, they're a quote unquote terrorist group. So they have weapons, but they don't have an Iron Dome. They don't have billions of dollars from the US government. They don't have weapons manufacturers that want to sell weapons to them, you know. It's very different, and it's so alarming to me that American Jewish leaders think that this stuff is okay, and that liberal Zionists you know, are in such denial about Zionism being this far right political ideology, not only based on the, you know, ethnic cleansing partially based on the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, but on like the idea of an ethno-religious nation state. Like, it's unfortunate. It's really sad, and it's the thing that weighs so heavy on me as a Jewish person, like, I don't want to leave Jewish people behind, you know, I don't want to leave Jewish people behind. But this is, the trauma of the Holocaust playing out on a really large scale on an internet, like on a empirical stage. And a lot of Jewish people don't want to admit that. A lot of Jewish people don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit that, we as Jewish people probably owe Palestinians something, besides our unwavering support of them in getting free. But like, it's also a lot of like what I've been thinking about is like, what do Jewish people owe Palestinians in this moment besides our support? Because it's just so scary what's happening right now. So scary.
Will you define Zionism?
Yeah, it's at this point over 100, I mean, it's a few different things. It's a political ideology. For Christians, it's a religious prophecy. And these two, and yeah, for Jewish people, it is a political ideology and also a connection to the quote unquote, land of Israel of like the times of the Torah, which I'm not a biblical scholar, but I do know that like, what that entire Middle East looks like right now is not, what people talked about at different places, in the Torah, in the Bible, and what Christian people call the Old Testament, but what I call the Torah. But like, it's a political ideology that, says that Jewish people have a right to have a religious Jewish state in the land of Israel where the Second Temple is, which was a thing, which was an actual thing, which is, both a landmark for Jewish people and also for Muslims, because it marks a period in history when the Second Temple was destroyed. Like, Jewish people and rabbinic Jews didn't do sacrifice anymore, animal sacrifice anymore. Like, Judaism became something else. It became what it is always evolving to, towards this year of our Lord 5784. So it's like it's a religion that's constantly evolving and has constantly evolved. And rabbinical Judaism, and like, this is just me, not an expert, someone who works at a synagogue, having grown up in Jewish education, just like the quick and dirty. Judaism is a religion that has evolved over thousands of years. We have all these laws, we have all this commentary, we're always arguing about what Torah means, what all of the writings of these prominent rabbis mean, what all of the different texts like the Talmud, like what all of these things mean. It's too much to get into, but yeah, so it is a holy place. And also for many generations, I do know, there are Arab Jews, and for many generations that have been living in Jerusalem. Like, I know someone who a Jewish person that I am friends with who talks on this stuff a lot. 7 generations of her family lived in Jerusalem, and were from Jerusalem before some of them came to the States. So yeah, it's a political ideology that was born out of imperialism and out of the Holocaust, like out of the Holocaust, out of this horrible, awful thing, genocide that happened to Jewish people, where we were already never a huge population, and a sizable number of Jewish people were wiped out forever. Entire families of Jewish people were killed. And Zionism grew stronger post World War II, and Zionism, the imperialism of the British colonial era, helped Zionism establish a state in Israel. So Zionism as an ideology, as a political Jewish ideology, has mostly always been tied to British colonialism, and was sort of, helped along by British colonialism. And in turn, white Jewish people were helped along into assimilating into white supremacy, which is a leg up in the capitalist, racial capitalist world that we live in, getting assimilated into, as we know, obviously, Jews of color exist, and they cannot easily assimilate, most of them, into white society. But white Jews, like my Jewish background, like all Ashkenazi Jews, which are, a very prominent, large community in the United States, can do that easier. So yeah, it's complicated, is what I'm trying to say. Zionism is complicated, but what's happening right now because of it is not. And I think, understanding how it is tied up, the ideology of like political Jewish Zionism is tied up in the annihilation of Palestinians, is very similar to Manifest Destiny, the way the United States was formed.
And it's all happening. I mean, there's a great meme. Again, the emperor has no clothes. There's a great meme going around about like land for sale, just like they did in the quote frontier times when they were just stealing land from indigenous.
Yeah, because there was a land sale. There was an Israeli land sale in Los Angeles in Pico Robertson. I'm currently still dealing with the fallout from that protest because I organized this Jewish Voice for Peace. But yeah, there was an Israeli land sale. People had a protest. Zionists kicked the crap out of some Palestinian protesters. The news for the first, like, I would say even almost 24 hours after the stuff went down in front of the synagogue, the land sale was at a synagogue. They were protesting in front of a synagogue, marching towards and protesting in front of a synagogue. Anyway, for the first almost 24-hour news cycle after this happened, there was no mention of why the protesters were there. None. Zero.
And I just want to point out, this is a land sale that they're conducting at a
synagogue. They're selling land of people who are currently being bombed into no homes. Yeah. No
like every 10 minutes, a child is murdered. Like they're selling that land because they see it, and it's just a land grab. It's so like when it's just the underpinnings of greed. Like there really is. It's so funny because like it seems like everything is so complicated, but actually it's not that complicated.
It's not. It's not. It's not complicated. And like Jewish people, a lot of Jewish people have these really complicated feelings about Israel. And a lot of it is because a lot of our relatives live in Israel. I'm really lucky. I have very distant relatives in Israel. Never met them before. Like that's how distant they are. Like I feel very lucky to not have been more sucked in by the propaganda, because I have nothing, even though I went as a teenager, I have not a ton of like, I don't know, I just like, it didn't have, I never felt some type of way about Israel. And people get, I mean, not people, kids in this country, Jewish kids in this country get brainwashed around Israel. I was brainwashed around Israel. You know, I went to Hebrew, I went to Reform Temple, I went to Hebrew school. We did all of that stuff. You know, like
On
once again,
birthright?
I didn't go on birthright, which is lucky, although maybe not so lucky, because maybe if I would have went on birthright, I would have been like, these people are insane. I know there's something going on there. No, I went as a teenager. I went on a trip that was only for kids in Los Angeles County. So I went on an LA County Jewish Federation of Los Angeles trip. And it was a long trip. I was there for 2 months in the summer. And it was also a nerd trip, because you could take history classes and Hebrew classes. And if you passed a test at the end of the month, you could get high school credit. So it was like a long, yeah, we like lived in Jerusalem for a month and like took classes and bummed around with each other. It was fun. I had a great time, except for the fact that it made me feel weird and I didn't know why. And I was the people pleaser, so I didn't know how to like um express my understanding of why it felt creepy to me. Besides the fact that there's like, you know, army people, Israeli army soldiers everywhere, like carrying AK-47s or whatever, automatic rifle, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
I went to Israel on not a, well, I want to
I
say
think you went on like a weird for like special people tour, didn't you?
yeah, it was like a leadership sort of networking opportunity. It was like it was cool because like in seeing it's interesting because it wasn't like um brainwashing. It was kind of like getting a master's degree in like all of the like Middle Eastern politics and like the history of Israel. And like they didn't sugarcoat anything, and but like also it was still heavily toward the Israeli side, right? Like that was kind of the thing. And it was like engaging with Israel is what this foundation wanted to do, is take leaders, young leaders from the United States and get them engaged in Israel.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to
That's
watch.
just like propaganda in itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like what else is there to do, you know, like
And I mean, I'm glad I went because I'm glad I got to see. I mean, it's a beautiful country, but like it changed how I felt about borders. Suddenly, I realized, oh, borders are all made up, and like I like there was a lot that happened in that trip that really helped me almost radicalize more. And my grandfather is buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, so I got to go visit his gravesite, and like that was really cool. I mean, you know, and like I'm not attached to it. You know what I mean? Like I think that like bodies decay and spirits live on. And so I think my grandmother's or my grandfather and my grandmother are as much here with me to get today as where their bodies are, right? But um everything has been really fascinating watching what's happening like in the community because it's a big leadership network community, like people who've gone on this trip. And
oh yeah. So people are talking on the internet with each
yeah,
other about it.
yeah, and like seeing who is hardcore Free Palestine and who is hardcore Zionist, and like who is claiming that they're like a Zionist, but it's okay to be a Zionist for these reasons. And I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I sound convinced, but I'm sure of nothing, right? Like I'm here to like live out my values, and like if you can do the mental gymnastics to feel okay about one child dying every 10 minutes, then wow. You know, that's all I can say. It's just wow, you know, but like it's interesting how the brain
One child dying every 10 minutes, and also like not, and obviously like, and we're gonna talk about this a little later, like I'm not trying to put all of this on Jewish people, because there are greater forces at play that don't give a flying fuck about Jewish people. And that's how this story is playing out, which is why it's so upsetting to me a lot of the time that Jewish people can't seem to see that, or Jewish people who are Zionists. Not all Jewish people are Zionists, or else I would feel way lonelier than I do, and I don't anymore. But yeah, it's upsetting. It's upsetting to me because not being able to take responsibility for what's going on is also like not really being able to understand the bigger picture here. And I feel so much responsibility, even though like it's my tax dollars, I'm not doing the thing, obviously, but it is my tax dollars. And I do pay my taxes, even though, I wish I didn't have to. But it's like, yeah, I don't understand how, there's a lot of Jewish people right now that are so stuck in like the we are right and we must have Israel mode of thinking. And just like, there's no possibility that like Israeli soldiers aren't like torturing Palestinians. There aren't like jails that are basically filled with Palestinians that are basically concentration camps. Like all of these things that our ancestors experienced, we are putting on another group of people. And like the unwillingness to like come to terms with that is like the unwillingness to see the bigger picture of everything that's going on. And like, I'm obsessed with the bigger picture, like that's why we're here. That's why we're talking today. Because I think it helps me, like sort of look it in the face and like figure out like what my role is, like, what do I need to do? How do I need to like be in the world? And how can I push myself and like into more uncomfortability around how things are falling apart? And this is a huge part of it. Like Palestine is a huge part of it. And there's a lot of Jewish people. I mean, there's a lot of people in general, but there's a lot of Jewish people that are just really digging their heels in on this stuff. And it feels sad. It feels sad, as a Jewish.
I read a statistic that there are more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish people, and not all Jewish people are Zionists. So let's talk about Christian Zionism and like what it is and like why it's so dangerous.
Yeah. So Christian Zionism is a theological belief. And I did this, let me get my notes up for a second, because maybe I have my old notes, because I love to read. It's funny, my friend made fun of me because when I was doing the research for the thing I did on Christian Zionism, I was like, I want to listen to an ex-fundamentalist Christian talk about Christian Zionism. So I went into the podcast world and I found exactly that. I found this guy, Tim Whitaker, and I will put his stuff in the show notes. He is something called the New Evangelicals. He started this podcast, like sort of content empire about, deconstructing out of Christian fundamentalism, but still being a Jesus follower. And his stuff is great. And so I now I listen to him all the time. And my friend was making fun of me. Because she was like, oh, there's Christian people you like. And I was like, yes, I do. Okay. I work with clergy.
Also, like, it's similar to me. You're obsessed with the Duggars. And if you're out there and you're making a hard right turn out of Christian fundamentalism, but you still want to love Jesus, Ginger Duggar's book is for you. If you want the tea about how a reality TV mogul exploited his children, you want to read Jill Duggar's memoir.
Yes, exactly.
My favorite quote from Jill Duggar's memoir is what she said to Jim Bob during a mediation is, quote, "You treat my pedophile brother better than you treat me."
Yes. And yeah. And for the record, I like hate watch the Duggars, so I never liked them. But
I love watch them. I love it. I'm so confused by their choices in belief systems, but for some reason, it's just like the happy.
it sucks you in. I'm not going to say I wasn't sucked in by the wholesomeness of some of it, and like the matching outfits or whatever. But I was just like, this is horrifying. Why do people think? Why is this so popular? I was just like, one of
I also love thrifting, which as a thrifter, I love. Like they buy used and save the difference. That's the Duggar family motto.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's gotta be your motto when you have freaking 18 kids or however many goddamn kids. 19 kids.
19. It's 19 total plus an extra one they're raising one of Jim Bob's sister's kids or niece's kids.
I wonder how that's going. Also, where's our gay Duggar?
Oh, you know what? Hashtag, I think it's Saya, who hasn't come out yet. That's been heavily rumored, and Jana, who also hasn't come out yet. So
yeah, I'm always speculating that it's Jana.
I mean, it's Jana plus. I mean, listen, I'm a witch. I know what I see. I saw her relationship with this other woman named Laura, that was very heavily featured on the show, but they were just friends. But like, I know what a lesbian friendship looks like. Even if you're not diddling, like you're still having a deep emotionally lesbian relationship. So anyway.
Agree. Okay. I found my Tim Whitaker quote about Christian Zionism because I like the way that he sums it up as a person who like lived in a household that believed this. Okay, so broadly, it's a Christian worldview that all Jewish people must return to the land of Israel in order to fulfill a biblical prophecy. Once all Jewish people return to Israel, Jesus will return to earth, and all non-Christian people will either convert to Christianity or die/be damned to hell for all eternity. Okay, so that's like the broad overview of what Christian nationalism is. And here's Tim's quote. I was taught as a child that the nation state of Israel becoming recognized by the US was a major fulfillment of biblical prophecy, getting us closer to the end times. So that is what, in a nutshell, what Christian Zionism is. And there's, because this is such a obviously there's so many different flavors of fundamental Christianity. So some people believe certain things about the rapture and like pre-trib and post-trib. Like if you want to really get in the weeds about it, in that I have a link tree about Christian Zionism, and Bevan will give everyone a link to it in the show notes, I'm assuming.
Trib and post-trib, what does that mean?
Pre-tribulation and post-tribulation, which has to do with like the book of Revelations and like when the second coming is going to happen, and like which is like either before or after, Satan comes to earth, and like, and all of this stuff around Christian. Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's fan fiction. It's like it's shit that is like we're living inside these Christian fundamentalist fan fiction about what they think is going to go on.
I always like to quote Dolly Parton. It's a good song lyric. People have been talking about the end of time ever since time began.
Yeah, it's that.
It's like the second coming is either happening or it's not, but like, why don't you make the world around you better right now? Feed.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it is really interesting to me because I feel like, and people have talked about this a little, but I've never heard it talked about broadly, but it feels like an excuse to not participate in the figuring out how we aren't destroyed by extraction and climate change, which is like, that is what is like everything that, everything that we do and everything that is the world is about right now is like, we're all marching towards that. It just depends on like how slow or fast we get there, depending on what happens in the world basically right now. But we are not, and have not, and still not, as a world globally, gotten our shit together about like, how do we end extraction? Like, how do we end climate change? Because to me, I feel like, it is an excuse for fundamentalist Christians to not have to participate and to be more like inward and like only give a shit about people who have the same Christian, quote unquote, morals and values that they do, and not care about anyone else unless they want to convert, you know?
What's Christian nationalism?
Okay. So let's talk about Christian nationalism as it like is currently performing itself out today in 2024 in the United States. Christian theocracy and Christian nationalism are, here in the US, beliefs around the idea that the founding fathers wanted a Christian-based democracy and they did all of this stuff that they did secretly because they wanted this, as opposed to like, writing a constitution that separated church and state. So right now, fundamentalist Christians that have a lot of power in the United States are currently trying to sort of like rewrite American history in a way that has a sort of narrative around that the US was meant to be a quote unquote Christian nation, as opposed to a pluralistic democracy, which it never has been, but has always strived to be, even though it was, we have never as a country reckoned with the fact that our quote unquote democracy was founded on, chattel slavery and the genocide of the indigenous people that lived on this land before we got here. So we've never reckoned with that as a country. So I think that is a lot of the reason why the people who currently have the most power in our government and conservative right-wing media and memes on the and like the right-wing sort of like internet spaces and people who are currently attempting to run for different offices across the country are really have taken this narrative and have made it into what it is, and that is why people like Mike Johnson, who is the Speaker of the House and is a Christian nationalist, an avowed Christian nationalist, has like said it, and is a Christian fundamentalist and also a very Duggar adjacent man. People like him, people like Ron DeSantis, they're all really huge in a part of this huge project right now that is sort of just like attempting to rewrite history in a way that, causes our country to just become like a huge sort of like clearinghouse for right-wing white supremacist ideas to become codified. And as we've seen with the Supreme Court and with the debate last week, which was horrifying.
But debate in quotes too, just like democracy in quotes, like debate, like more like sputtering, like mutually. And it's so interesting because I saw a video of Mitt Romney and Obama at their debate, and like it was just night and day. It's like the political theater isn't even trying anymore to make us like to appear professional, or like they're gonna do anything worthwhile other than stroke their own egos.
Yeah, and it was like wild to me that Jake Tapper didn't say anything. I don't know, maybe that shouldn't be wild to me, but he should have said something. I don't know. It was very strange. He just like stood there as these two men made complete freaking fools of themselves, especially Joe Biden. And that's where I like,
Genocide Joe, you
huh?
Genocide Joe. I just said
Inside Joe. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like it's times like these when I feel like such a Virgo, because like I saw the debate, and then like I started reading some commentary on it, and I saw someone being like, what WTF, Democrats, you made this bed and now you don't want to lie in it. And then like, yes, this, my like Virgo, I told you so like brain is like, yes, you guys did this. And now you're like poopy pants about like how you like Joe Biden made a fool of himself. An 84-year-old man who is clearly not doing well made a fool of himself.
He should be at home with his family in the garden and not like being Weekend at Bernie's by the political establishment.
It's wild. It's wild. Yeah, it's weird. It's wild when you watch a debate where Donald Trump was like not the problem. Because even though he's always the problem, he just did the same thing he always does. He wasn't any like better or worse, it seemed like to me. He just lied.
You know, his innovation this time around, and I didn't watch the debate. I don't waste my time on things like that. Like
I was live tweeting about it and any time that they talked about immigration.
Yeah. What I think his innovation though this time around was using Palestinian as an insult.
Yeah.
I don't know who came up with it.
Had a lot to say about that. I'm glad.
So on brand and so contemporary, you know. Like I was like, it's gross.
I know.
And horrifying, but like that's on brand for Donald Trump.
It makes you understand that like when he does something like that like literally he like has probably like Fox News on in the background at all times, and every time it was probably one of those things where they just said Palestinian like 20 times that day on Fox News, and so he like brought it on stage with him.
You think Fox News is even talking about Palestine that much?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to know with Donald Trump because he's an Israel lover, but he's also an isolationist. So, but maybe not for Israel. So
he's still eating McDonald's for every meal. Why hasn't that killed him yet?
I know, it's fascinating. All of that is so fascinating. I like to be fascinated by it because I have no dog in the fight. Yeah. So like I'm here to like do other things, that are important. So it's just like funny. Now I feel like I'm 40 going on almost 41, and now it's just like funny entertainment to me.
Okay, so speaking of like what can we do? What are things that like a regular person can do to help like free Palestine, to help like defeat Christian Zionism, Christian nationalism, and all of these forces that are like insidious but persistent?
Yeah, I think right now, in terms of the Christian nationalist stuff, I think one of the most important things, and like I do admit, I live in a bubble and I talk about this stuff all the time. and with really smart people, people who are way smarter than me, people who study this stuff for pay and write books about it. And I feel really, really lucky and blessed to like to get to be in those spaces with people, because I am obsessed with seeing the bigger picture and they help me see it. But that is a little bit of a bubble, I understand. And I think with the Christian nationalism stuff, it's like, if your friends aren't talking about this or it's not on their radar, it really should be. And so just like even giving someone like a podcast, like these ideas are dangerous because not enough people are tuned in. And like if more people were tuned in and more people were angry about this stuff, like maybe more people would be like organizing against it. Or at least like asking more questions about like what they do, or maybe like figuring out how to like, I don't know, boycott CNN because Jake Tapper didn't say anything at the debate, like doing things like around that, or just, helping your friends become informed about how insidious this stuff is and how it's here. It's not coming. It's here. It's here. And like, because you were taught by older gay folks that this stuff was dangerous, as I know that as well, because I was taught by older gay folks that like they're not going to stop at us, they're coming, the Christian, the fundamental Christian fundamentalism is coming for, I mean, I'll tell you right now, the way these people feel about how much power they have right now in their like revivalist, like political meanings, like Turning Point, all of these like different far right, organizations that marry Christianity with far right, they're talking about taking the vote away from women. Yeah, it's like that. It's like that. They're talking about the two big things they're talking about are no votes for women and no fault divorce, how much that has fucked cis men, straight men over.
Wow.
Where do you think that those ideas come from? Like these patriarchal Christian ideas, like
It's one of those things that like women getting their material needs met by men is so like inherent to the way like we're socialized to seek men for safety. I see a lot of, and someone I want to have on the podcast talks a lot about this, is like the idea of like bisexuality and like how typically like, like 80% of bisexual women are partnered with cis men because of like a lot of that inherent socialization around your material needs being met by men. Even my mom, when she left my dad, like I was 18 months old, it was the early 80s, and she couldn't get her own credit card because
yeah
of husband.
No, that is what they want. They want to go back there.
Yeah.
And these men, I'm talking about men, pastors, male pastors, conservative politicians, mostly like male pastors and Theo bros, but like sitting on the stage.
Yeah,
with,
bros.
that's what they call them on Twitter. I think it's funny.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a very Christian thing to call them. Like I'm just like stealing their term, but whatever. They get on stage at these like big rallies and like conservative Christian things and fucking say this shit in front of like thousands of people, So it's real. It's here, it's real. We have to understand that like, the government is not gonna necessarily protect our rights. They haven't been doing so great at protecting trans rights, that's for sure. And we just have to figure out how to like protect our people, and be more in community with each other and not let the really petty shit divide us.
yeah. There's a lot we can do just from I want the inherent takeaway that people take from my work to just be an empowerment to do the little things, because I think we get very disempowered from even trying. but like taking on meal prep for a single mom in your life, you know, like dropping off, like, hey, here, feed your kids, like that takes money away from corporations that like sell fast food, right? Like all of these little ways that we can like interrupt the flow of commerce and just become more and more interdependent. And like I really think the way forward is like more land projects where there's like co-ownership and low rent, because
Yeah.
you just, you know, let rich people run it all and siphon all of our resources, and we have to stop that. But the way we do that is by stopping our resources as much as possible going to the big rich guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like understanding that I think now is the time, if you don't have a political home, like if you don't have people that you organize with, it doesn't have to be organizing everything, you know, like, but you need, now is the time to have a place you with people, to have be in community with people around an issue or around something in your community, and have a place where you can talk to people about these things and like be principled and like work shit out with people and figure out how to be in community and like understand like how, like, you know, really how, like, be in like talking to people about like how fast things are changing and how inflation is fucking people, you know, and like how can we do that? How can I, you know, I live on a weird street that is like across the street from a hospital, a non-emergency hospital, so there's no sirens, don't worry, I can sleep. But like it's this weird street that, like, you know, it goes, the hospital is across the street from us, so we don't really have any, I have some next door neighbors but not across the street from me. But then the thing goes, the street goes up and it flanks the 101, and it's like a weird dead end but not dead end street. There's no houses on it, and there's a lot of motorhomes now, because there's so many unhoused people in the US, or in the US, but also just like in my neighborhood, you know, and I've been trying really hard to figure out who they are and if they have any needs. It's like hard because I think I have different hours than a lot of them do, and I'm just like away from my house, you know, at like I leave early in the morning often to like walk to my office, and then I, you know, I don't come back for a while because I'll be walking dogs. But like just like knowing who your neighbors are, if they have needs, if you have needs, and, you know, being able to have friends that you can talk about this stuff with. This stuff is really hard. What's happening right now is hard, you know?
And there's so much misinformation out there, and like learning how to be a critical thinker is just such an essential skill that like I didn't even realize how essential it was, and I'm so grateful for that. I mean, I learned it in school, but I also learned it from older queers, you know, like it just
Yeah.
teaching me how to see what was happening for real. Um, and yeah, just I've I this conspiracy theory came floating. I just wanted to tell this to you. This conspiracy theory came floating my way um, through my interpersonal connections. And like, I hang out with a mixed group of people from different political backgrounds. And like, I focus on the values that align us. But I could not believe this person was saying this to me. Apparently, quote unquote, Biden, you know how they blame Biden for like the gas prices, right?
Yeah.
So this like
That's
was
like every president. Yeah.
well, like it's like there. No, the reason why the gas prices are is because there's two oil companies in the whole world. Um, but Biden is bringing immigrants into the country and paying them like I want to say the figure was like $1 million a piece, but I know it wasn't that. It was like maybe a few $100,000. I don't know, but it was a lot of money, and it is the opposite of what actually Biden is doing. Biden is like creating more detention centers and like fucking over more immigrants. Like he doesn't care about immigrants at all. And I was like, you know, it's interesting. I'm out here on the far left, and here's what we're saying about Biden. like, like it is not that. And it's like because it's like they have to vote Democrat, and that was the goal. And I'm like, and they fast track them to citizenship. All of that is completely false. And also, like, it's almost as though they have to tell themselves these stories in order to believe
Yes.
that Democrats could actually get elected.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
listen, the Democrats aren't doing
And that
great.
is and like the amount of fear that is in that story, like these fear-based stories that the far right uses to make white people afraid of people of color when in fact, you know, the majority of white folks in this country have far more in common with folks of color than not economically.
Yeah.
uh Maybe not in other ways because of like how people of color are treated in the United States, but like, you know the amount of fear-based stories that they have to tell to make people vote Republican is a lot. They're telling them all the time. They're telling them all the time. And it's just it's a it's tough. It's tough to have to, I mean, as a white person, like as white people, like all you can do is fucking push back against that shit. And it's really important to right now.
And ask questions. Like, my response to
Questions.
your
Yeah, ask questions.
was like, I'm pretty sure you actually don't believe in borders in general, right? And like, so that's I mean, because this person does
Yeah.
not. So like,
I'm pretty sure the food that you eat was picked by a migrant. like
yeah. Okay, we could talk about this for 6 hours.
we could.
Wrap it
We
up.
found are there things that we didn't hit? I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, no apologies necessary. I think there's probably plenty we didn't hit, but like, is there anything else pressing that you had on in your notes or anything that you wanted to address before we depart?
Let me
But there's plenty in the show notes, like the Christian Zionism resources that Sonya put together.
yeah.
It used to have a Hello Kitty branding, and it's now more professional looking.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that just I don't think I have anything else. I'm glad that like I I really wanted to like talk about like how Jewish trauma is being weaponized right now because like I'm not an expert on this but I know people who have been talking about it for a long time, and I didn't really understand it until I listened to like former Israeli soldiers who were traumatized by and like, obviously like came out the other side in uh specifically, I mean, yeah, so I'm glad I got to talk about Jewish trauma with you. And I think, it's really hard for people who aren't Jewish to like understand. And it's also like really hard for me it took many, many years for me to wrap my brain around because I don't know, I didn't really feel, they try like when you're Jewish and you're young, they try to traumatize you around like the Holocaust, but like I I don't know. Like those stories felt important to me, but like I didn't feel like why do I need to make this thing such a central part of like my Judaism and like my Jewish experience, like so there's yeah, and because I think it's a good thing to talk about here too because we there's not really a chance for me, like when I'm out in the world, it's about like centering Palestinians and like centering the Palestinian voice, and what is going on in Palestine right now. And like talking about Jewish trauma and like all of this, how Jews in the US have been like assimilated into white supremacy and like, all of that kind of stuff. It's like there's not a ton of spaces for Jewish people to talk about that with non-Jewish people right now. So maybe that will help, maybe your listeners, that will help some of your non-Jewish listeners understand what's going on. Not that it excuses anything that's going on, but like, it's hard. It was really, really hard for me to like make that connection because I didn't feel it happening to me. But then people told me about it, and like even the rabbi that I work with was like, a lot of what's going on right now has to do with like people reliving Jewish trauma, and like nothing is gonna end there until Jewish people stop doing this to themselves, you know? And that's a tough reality. It's a tough reality piece of this puzzle of what's going on in Gaza right now. It's really hard. It's hard. Yeah.
Sonya, I'm grateful for your work. You have so much experience in activism and speaking truth to pseudo power, and I'm so grateful you're in my life. And I learned so much from you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I will make sure to give you a lot of awesome links for all of your listeners. And also just a quick shout out to my Palestinian friend, Samer, who he and I are doing some fundraising for his family who is currently in Gaza. So I will give you a link to his GoFundMe as well. Samer lives here. His cousin lives in Gaza with his family, and we're trying to get them out. So I thank people in advance if they decide to kick down $5 or any money to Samer's family, and go do some reading about this, listeners, and about Christian Zionism, Christian nationalism, and maybe you'll become as much of a sicko as myself or Bevan.